Hello. All right, it's on. Maria Soyka here with Kelley Sanabria, and today we're talking about the I wish themes that came from our pop-up think tank that we had a couple weeks ago about women's wisdom at work. Hey, Kelly.
Hey Maria.
Ready? We're going to talk about I wish. So, what this means is this is what we can describe as the longing section. To me, I think that wishes reveal the gap between what maybe participants experience as possible and then also what's currently available, right, in people's reality. So, getting into it, the four themes were institutional change, men wanting to know how they can help on this topic of women's wisdom at work, their role and wishes around menstrual equity, along with the wish to trust what we already know. So, on the first theme about institutional change, one that came through is I find myself wishing we looked not only at how to bring this wisdom into organizations, but also whether the current rules of work and markets are actually able to recognize it. Other comments that people made were, I wish these conversations were held at a more institutional level. This is a global need and calls for a cultural shift that affects everyone. And the next is, I wish we had greater clarity on how to tackle the pipeline while keeping pace with how it evolves. I also wish I'd had tools coming through the leadership pipeline myself. So we have our leadership consultant, Kelley Zanavria. What is your response to what people are longing, wishing for?
Yeah, I love this section. People really were not afraid to call out, like, okay, this is great. We're talking about women's wisdom at work, but like, are the institutions actually ready for this? So, this is, I mean, I find myself questioning myself this too, because we're saying emotions aren't wrong and that they can be useful in the context of work. What does that actually look like? How do we keep that healthy? And this person is asking, can the system receive what this work offers? And so I think that's the right question to be asking because you can develop a woman all the way to the top, right? You can provide coaching, mentoring, skills training, leadership training, all of it. And if the organizational culture rewards aggression and certainty and speed above anything else, then that's not going to work. She's going to hit a wall that has nothing to do with her capability. And so, for the executives watching this, it's worth asking, what does our incentive structure actually reward? These are the systems this participant is describing, right? You can support women's leadership, that's great. And are your culture, your processes, your metrics actually set up to recognize and reward this intuitive wisdom, this emotional labor that women are doing in leadership? So there's a ton more that I can't wait to explore here, but I think this is the right question to start with.
Yeah, and it's basically a question of epistemology. Like in
Mm.
the fall, I took a course in my master's of sociology class about epistemology, and that basically means like what is knowledge and who decides what is knowledge. And that has a long, 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 long history where basically, like, epistemology is the theory of knowledge. And so women have struggled for the right to both access knowledge and to produce knowledge, along with transmitting it in legitimate ways, because it's like who decides what's legitimate.
Mhm.
So, in many cases, women's expertise has existed outside of formal institutional support and has sometimes been therefore dismissed as anecdotal or unscientific. And so, again, this exclusion is due to women's knowledge not aligning with social codes governing credibility. And it has like many, 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 many years of history that's keeping it there. But also, yes, and also, nobody's ever lived this day before. So it's not to say that, yeah, like new ways of thinking can't become what is real and accepted. And so I'll give an example because I researched this a lot actually. Midwifery offers like a very powerful metaphor for epistemology because, as we know, midwives facilitate babies being born, and epistemology facilitates conversations as to what knowledge we decide is alive. So
Mm.
historically, midwifery is one of the longest held roles by women, and it draws on experiential feminine wisdom passed between women. Yet during the age of a gentleman's society, like in the maybe 1700s or so, there were male physicians publicly discrediting midwives' expertise and framing women's experiential knowledge as inferior. And so basically, like, there are these men, they were male physicians, they're like writing, like, don't listen to midwives, they don't know what they're talking about. Even though midwives had given birth themselves, had like gone through a lot of education for it, had like also been in the networks of the women giving birth, like in their communities for years and years and years. And basically, it's like an elite male authority legitimizing women's knowledge despite extensive lived experience and documentation. And the way that the midwives handled that at that time is that they continued to do it anyway. They wrote about their work, they did their work. They just didn't worry about the critiques or that someone was disagreeing, and they kept delivering babies anyway. And so I'm sharing this because I think it's interesting at a structural level. Like, dismissing midwifery reflects as epistemological patterns that feminine intuitive knowledge is undervalued when it does not conform to the dominant norms of legitimacy. So, to take this out of this like sociological academic lens, let me put it into real life, like everyday life. Like, said another way, the solution is to keep going anyway and believe in the integrity of it, and let yourself hold out for people who are aligned with the integrity of what you know to be true, because they do exist. Kelley exists. I didn't know her before I met her. And you're basically just waiting for each other. So you could spend all of your attention about how nobody understands you, or you could just keep doing your thing and wait till you find someone who does, because they totally exist. It's just not being talked about or written about until we just do it anyway.
Beautiful. As Maria knows, I love her perspectives on everything. She always has a beautiful perspective to everything. And this is the perfect segue actually to our second theme, which is about the men who joined our conversation and what they communicated in terms of wanting to be able to move this work forward and not feeling sure how. So here are some of the quotes that folks filled out when we were during, in the middle of the pop-up think tank, and they had a prompt that said, I wish. And then I wish blank. And this is what they said. As a man, I often wish to know if a female or female presenting coworker had some feedback for me or the team. I want to be a safe person to bring this stuff up with, but it doesn't always feel right to bring it up. I wish polarity was a common phrase and concept on our teams so we could step into that language. Side note, I also wish polarity was a common phrase for teams, and I'm more than happy to come and share it with your team. It's one of my favorite things to do, so hit me up. Okay, back to quotes. Another quote was, I wish that more men wanted to learn about these things. Ha ha ha. Third quote, if men, masculine folks, are also hearing about this wisdom and growing their own empathic muscles for the workplace. So again, going back to that first comment that said, as a man, I wish to know if people have feedback for me, but it doesn't always feel right to bring it up. I think this is the most strategically important comment in the entire data set from the entire conversation. So if I put like my consultant hat on, I would say, exactly what you said in this comment. I would say this to your team. I would name it. And then another option is to use 360 feedback, anonymous 360 feedback as well, so that folks can give that feedback to you if they would like to. And then if I'm putting my coach hat on, I'm thinking, what makes it not feel right to bring up? And so this is exactly what I want to keep exploring. I think this is so juicy. It's like, what are the dynamics? What are the assumptions at play here? And I'm going to be making this my homework. So make sure you're following me, make sure you're following Maria. Go to my website, get on my newsletter, because we're going to be building guidelines that leaders can actually use for how to bring this up, how to have conversations, how to be a good ally in the workplace. And I know I joked about the polarity comment earlier, but he says that he wishes it was a common phrase and concept so people could step into it. And that's exactly what happens. The polarity framework offers everyone a shared language. everyone now has kind of this like level playing field of we know this dynamic, we understand polarities. It's something they've been experiencing but haven't had language for. And in my experience, it does really resonate with teams and it's adopted very easily and very naturally. And teams will start naming their own polarities very quickly and then using the language around like over indexing, the upsides and the consequences of overuse and things like that. And the other good thing is that the polarity framework doesn't assign blame. It assigns responsibility to a system dynamic. So you don't get into that like back and forth, me versus you kind of a thing.
Nice. Yeah, what I'm getting from you is that welcoming people into the same shared language to solve for their shared tensions together just opens the pathway for resolution.
Yeah,
Imagine that.
absolutely. It's like dialogue, conversation.
Nice. Okay, so moving into the third theme was about menstrual equity. And basically, one of the themes that came through was I wish menstrual equity were discussed more widely, speaking of dialogue. And I wish there were no barrier for women to participate in life fully. No woman ever, irrespective of her age, should feel ashamed in something as natural as being a woman, be it menstruation, menopause, and everything in between. So for this, I mean, these topics are very personal. So I would echo appreciation for my own mother, women in my family, aunts, and basically like all like women leaders, especially in my communities growing up, who really normalized discussion about what to expect when you did get your period when you were younger. And then it goes on, like in my early 20s, I worked in an office in Denver, and there was an office manager who always kept tampons ready in the bathroom. And they were organic too, by the way. So like that's just one example of like structural preparation. So it's just normal. And also, I'd say any chance I've benefited from soul sisters in my life, and I would extend that to you, who allow you to be able to show up how you're feeling and normalize whatever emotions you're feeling. And like if it's tiredness, if it's enthusiasm, like it's all good and it all belongs. And then just being real about like how to uplift one another in a realistic way that honors what you're experiencing and not like saying you need to be something other than what you are, and having especially like women friends in your corner who allow that. It really just opens the possibility of how again we emerge as everyday leaders. It's not this thing that's limited to a decision making room. It's like in these everyday conversations. So I'd be curious to hear how that landed with you of the comments.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about that everyday leadership in your own life, right? It doesn't have to be this like corporate executive situation. It's like how are you treating the other women in your life? How that's leading, right? So always with the beautiful perspective there. I love these quotes. They resonated with me personally because I'm entering perimenopause. And even that, I feel like a taboo around naming and saying out loud, although it's a very real part of my life. Like a lot of my friends are like, why am I waking up at 3 a.m.? And how does that affect your workday? And how do you feel? And so, another example, like I installed a plugin on my calendar and it tracks where I am. Like literally, it's on like my Google Calendar. It tracks where I am in my cycle so I can plan, knowing on what energy levels to expect, how I might feel. And then that allows me to be intentional about how I plan my days. It's been helpful. And once I started doing that, I was like, oh, what would it look like if organizations created space for women to work this way, like to work with what our bodies need and want and our natural energy flows? What if women could take sick days when they're actually in pain without shame, instead of pushing through and burning out slowly? What if managers understood that women's energy might not be identical every day and stopped reading that as inconsistency? What if culture didn't require women to perform the I'm fine, because that performance itself is exhausting to like have to show up and pretend, right? So I don't have all the answers here, but I'm really curious about what power lies in this that we haven't tapped into yet. And I think that organizations who are willing to ask these questions are going to unlock something that the ones who aren't willing to have this conversation are going to miss. I think this is a very like futuristic, we'll get there someday kind of potential model. but I do hope that we start considering these things even more.
Yeah, and time isn't linear, so maybe it's already happening now. Like it happens in my work with you. Like I feel like we're very understanding of where each other are, and then when you just normalize the reality of a scenario, you can actually go so much further together.
Yeah. 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 And you create from a different place when you're understanding and just like allowing to be what it is, instead of fighting it. Okay, fourth and final theme. This was where people wished to trust what we already know. So the quotes we got for this one were, some of the quotes were, I wish that women's intuition was more frequently seen as wisdom, and I wish that I could learn to trust my own wisdom more and more. I wish for the invitation to own an internal process that has felt overwhelming and unwieldy at times, and to use it as a tool to lead and work more intuitively. I wish I dedicated more time to cultivating feminine and calm in myself and others. So these wishes landed deeply for me because what I hear under all three of them is the same thing. It's like, I know something, but I don't trust it yet. And we've all been taught that our emotions are inconvenient, that they just kind of get in the way, and that good leadership means staying in your head and out of your body. There's an author, Victoria Song, and she writes about how we almost pride ourselves on not letting emotions interfere. And the cost of that is that we end up disconnected from the very information that our bodies are carrying. We actually we had emotions and experienced emotions before we had language as human beings. And so emotions are actually faster, they process faster and give you information faster than your brain can actually articulate language. And so being disconnected from that doesn't make the emotions go away. Like you can't shut it off. You're freezing them or repressing them, and that drains your energy too while you're trying to perform without emotion on the outside. And so the inner work that I do with clients is a lot about managing emotions better. It's learning to hear them again. And our bodies, like I said, have so much intuition, so much knowledge. They know things before our minds can articulate it. And so for a woman in a leadership role, that's a competitive advantage if she learns to trust it. And Harvard Business School has research that says emotional intelligence accounts for nearly 90% of what sets high performers apart from peers with similar technical skills. That is a massive, massive edge.
Yeah. And okay, so then if you have this emotional intelligence setting high performers apart from peers, yeah, the way I see it, I mean, it's similar to how you frame it, but the way I see it is it's kind of two parts of like intuition and regulation. So the
Hmm.
more in regulated you are, the more intuitive you can be and enjoy. And so like, and then I think the difficulty with that is like not being regulated can sometimes override the intuition, and
Hmm.
sometimes it's coming from like a fear base.
Hmm.
And so I see it like our continuous work to be aware of the difference and what it takes to overcome the fear while also opening the door to intuition and the possibility that's behind that. And there's just so many gifts on the other side of that. So I've heard it said like, have I had 3 nights of good rest to be able to make this decision very well? And then like you can evaluate from there. So it's all information, it's all data of like how we take care of ourselves and show up for one another. And I think that being around you is a very healthy reflection of how to look out for one another, and you model it really beautifully. So thanks for being you.
As do you. I learn from you. So, this was great. Thank you so much for exploring these wishes, people that shared their wishes with us during the pop-up think tank. And just to recap, people had wishes around institutional change, men wanting to know how they can help, wishes around menstrual equity, and the wish to trust what we already know. And we're going to sign off, and we'll see you next time with what people wondered.
See you next time. Bye.